Hi folks, welcome to CNB. As promised last week, we are still in California in the United States, and we're here for the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. It's quite a spectacular setting here at the Pebble Beach Golf Course, and we're right at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and all of what you're seeing here is just the kind of enthusiasm that brings not just the car owners but car enthusiasts to this spot once a year to celebrate all kinds of classic cars. The festival itself has actually grown into something much larger now. So besides the classic cars on display, you also get to see a lot of the newer vehicles. Let's get straight into all of this. One of the most anticipated events on the global annual automobile calendar. The Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance is now considered the most prestigious classic car event in the world. The concours has been held every year since 1950, making this the 62nd edition of the event. Held on the fairway and greens of the 18th hole at the Pebble Beach Golf Course in California, this event attracts the who's who from the classic car world and also the automobile industry. The wonderfully gorgeous setting by the rocky Pacific shoreline makes it all the more special. Cars at the Pebble Beach Concours are not entered for competition, they are invited, which means that they have to be unique masterpieces in their own right. The concours doesn't really like to repeat cars as well, or in fact the special categories too very often, meaning regular visitors are in for a treat pretty much every time. This year the event had 28 categories across classic cars and bikes which were on display. The jury, which selects winners across categories, are a very experienced group of experts. The first time ever, an Indian was invited to be on this jury, Rana Manvendra Singh of Barwani, the leading voice on classic cars from India.
For me especially, and for me working all my life trying to safeguard the history and correct the history, I won't say safeguard, but correct the history of India and its car culture. It's been a huge journey, so it's a very big thing for me to be invited to Pebble Beach. So I would say that I've reached Mount Everest as far as I'm concerned.
It's also a good recognition of what's been happening in India, even though I know it's perhaps not to the extent you would have been happy with. But
no, yes, very true. Our hobby is now coming up. It's not probably take another 20 years to reach this kind of stage, but we are going towards that point now. I feel there are a lot of young generation which have taken up this hobby very, very well. Always remember one thing, that we lost one generation because of our, like Cuba, we lost a generation. The grandfathers know everything about the cars, and now the grandson know. The one generation is just being lost because of Ambassador, Fiats and Heralds.
it is also the first year that the concours has hosted a special set of featured categories for the cars of the Maharajas. 4 cars were invited from India, in fact, but sadly only 2 made it in time for the showing. But the 2 classes, Maharaja and Maharaja Rolls-Royce, still saw quite an impressive display of 15 gems. That included this car, an absolute masterpiece. The 1934 Rolls-Royce Phantom II, also referred to as the Star of India. This Continental all-weather convertible is finished in stunning aluminium panels and saffron paintwork and was ordered by the Maharaja of Rajkot. It was sold in 1944 by the royal family and has recently been brought back into the family by the current Crown Prince of Rajkot.
There will be a very big homecoming ceremony for the Star of India. when it comes back, because it would be back after 45 to 46 years.
I also bumped into a man who many of us can easily say is India's premier corporate royal, car enthusiast and Tata chairman, Ratan Tata. The fact that they have so many cars from India or a Maharaja class for the first time,
yeah.
that's quite special.
That's incidental.
But gorgeous
I'm glad
cars.
to see that happening. Where do you get to see a collection of cars through the ages this way? So beautifully kept and passionately looked after.
How many times have you been here, sir?
This is the second time.
This car got a lot of attention, not just because it was part of the Maharaja class though, it was purely the looks that got all the crowds in. The Swan car from the royal estate of Nabha is simply outlandish, and consider that it was built in 1910 and the mind boggles. The car was originally ordered by Nicol Mathewson, a Scotsman living in Kolkata, who then sold it to the Maharaja of Nabha. In 1919, the Maharaja had a smaller version built for everyday use called the Signet or Baby Swan. Both cars stayed in the royal family for over 70 years and are today housed in the Laguna Museum in the Netherlands. How did the Signet come along then? What was the
And then the Signet was made at the same estate of the Maharaja, and was done for, also I would say for fun or to drive on the estate. I think that's very nice because there's not known a mother and a daughter car.
Anywhere, yeah.
No, not
but
anywhere.
What engine does that have?
That
Where
has
did
an
he-
electric engine, very
Really?
advanced even, yes.
How about that?
Electric engine with a chain drive and
And everything else was sort of, the idea was lifted from this one, so it's got
yes, it has more or less the same model. This is made out of heavy wood, and that one is made of aluminium.
well, it's electric, right? So,
It's electric. It is electric.
and where do you have the car now, sir?
We have the car in our museum, the Lama Museum in The Hague in Holland. And they asked us to bring it over, and as it is a Maharaja day today at the concours at Pebble Beach, so we brought it.
Have you had other cars coming in here before?
Oh yes, many cars.
So you happy and excited to have like a class that was made this year, the Maharaja class? Something
I think
different.
very important because it's a part of the auto history, the Maharaja cars. I'm extremely happy they have done that.
And then there was the car I was rooting for. This 1930 Delage D8 with its Lalique mascot and coachwork by GSP Figoni. The car travelled from its home in Bangalore to be at Pebble Beach this year. It originally belonged to Maharaja Holkar of Indore.
It's a lot of effort. In fact, the condition that the car is in now, we need to really work 4 months, to try and get the specs organized.
Not everybody gets invited.
Not everybody
That's
gets
what it boils
invited.
down.
Yeah, not everybody gets invited. And once you get invited, you need to stand somewhere close to what their expectations are. And that's a hell of a lot. In fact, we started working, the time was running out, and at last it was so short and I could not ship the car. I have to airlift the car to be here. And then here I have friends, Pat Craig and Richard, who also worked on the car and made this car going well. So we had a good day on Thursday on the run, and today we are here. And it's a great feeling, great atmosphere. I mean, you really see a lot of true enthusiasts out here, and real car lovers. People come, spend so much of time, and they really appreciate, the lines of the car and everything. And it gives you so much of a hype. I think it's the first time that's happening for an Indian to bring in 2 cars and participate here in the show, and it's a very proud moment for me. Me being a humble collective back home, back in Bangalore, it makes me feel very, very nice, and more so because the whole family is here and all your friends are here. That gives me a lot of
It's really quite something, I have
Yes.
to say. But and it's my first time, so I know what you mean. But give us also a sense of the history of the car. Just ever since it was first bought, what all has it been through before you got it?
Yeah, this car is a 1930 Delage D8 Figoni bodied car. It's a sports cabriolet, belonged to Maharaja of Holkar of Indore. And this car was, unfortunately, in the 60s, it went to a show and it was parked in an ice factory. And, excuse me, it's parked in an ice factory and, with the salt and water and everything, there was so much of corrosion that happened. And in early 70s, they wanted to start the car, it wouldn't start. So they pulled out all the mechanicals, everything to, set it right, and they couldn't put it back, so they left it like that. And later, late end of 76, early 80, they tried to assemble. 60% of the parts were missing. Then Mr. Manvendra Singh of Barwani, he bought this car and he tried to restore in Bangalore with another friend, but he was not able to put things together for years and years and years. And then probably he thought that, I was another friend who could probably do cosmetically and keep this car back home with my collection. But he was pleasantly surprised, and so did I. My old man mechanic, which I need to remember, he's no more with us today, Paul D'Souza. He sort of went into each detailing. The crankshaft was in 4 bits and 2 bits were missing. So we got 2 bits made, forged with the TVS. So we got everything, and there were a lot of friends, were able to help us out and put everything together and bring this car back. But it is a dream.
But let me not obsess about just the Maharaja class. After all, there was plenty more to take in, right from these amazingly restored vintage motorcycles to other masterpieces. I did spend a lot of time with the GTs, really spectacular machines, some of which I couldn't even believe I was seeing. At all these events, it's impossible to take in all the vehicles that are here, but I'm particularly biased towards the European GT cars, the Grand Touring cars, and in particular we have some real masterpieces which are just the French GT cars. This particular one is a 1922 Delage, and besides the car itself, which is just spectacular, and it's here really for its coach work, you also get to see some special hood ornaments which are a little bit unusual, perhaps a little bit unique, and this particular car certainly has one of those. Yep, it's another Delage D8, also with Figoni coachwork and also with a stunning hood ornament. Folks, what a lovely color too, right? And then there was the Ferrari class of cars, both the Tourers and the competition cars. Unbelievable to see so many in one place, and that too, all the classics. This 1965 Ferrari 275 GTB is perhaps one of the design icons of the time, because really there's so much said about this car, there was so much written about it, and it was so aspirational. The movie stars wanted one of these, and of course, as we know, Scaglietti was the coach builder, which is why years later Ferrari actually did a tribute car to Scaglietti and called the 612 Scaglietti. And if you can see the car's shape, well, then you of course can see the inspiration for the 612 as well. Another featured class this year at Pebble Beach was the Souchik coachwork cars. Jacques Souchik was a Russian cabinet maker who then founded his coach building company in France. It operated from the 1920s to the 50s and produced some spectacular coachwork. Elegant lines mixed with a fair amount of flamboyance, like this marvelous blue Cadillac Series 62 Souchik from 1948. In fact, this car was displayed at the 1949 Paris Motor Show before it was shipped to its owner in New York. In fact, it was this 1928 Mercedes-Benz 680S Souchik Torpedo that won the overall Best in Show prize at the Concours d'Elegance this year.
Cheers!
It is time for us to slip into a short break here on CNB, but plenty more classic car action coming your way after that short break. Keep watching. gorgeous 1925 Mercer Series 6 runabout. Mercer, in fact, is one of the featured brands here at this year's Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. Welcome back to CNB. This is, of course, where we're coming to you from this week, and we've shown you some real treasures from the automobile world. What's interesting, though, is that even though this is the showcase event and the entire week really culminates in this particular event, when I said the entire week, it really is that. There's a whole lot of other events that happened right through the past few days, and we were lucky enough to be a part of some of those as well. If you thought that this was beautiful, well, you also got to see a lot of gems at the Quail gathering. Now, of course, it's not nearly as large. You don't have as many classes of vehicles, but you still get to see some pretty exciting stuff. And I can tell you, I had quite a time there too. It's best described as a day-long garden party, where a limited number of guests, 3,000 only to be precise, spend the day sipping champagne, nibbling on caviar or salmon, and taking in an enviable collection of some of the finest cars known to man.
All of you smiling and the most beautiful cars around.
The Quail, a motorsports gathering, celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, and as always was held in the lawns of the Quail Lodge Golf Club in Carmel. One Bugatti Veyron is a special sighting, and getting to see 5 of them standing next to each other, well, that is pretty rare, isn't it? Well, that's the kind of thing I'd expected really when I came in here to the Quail gathering. And besides the cliched things, you know, that you expect to see, the classic cars, the fancy hats and the champagne flutes, there's also stuff like that. Nice big engines rumbling away in the background, and also a lot of contemporary cars too, so it's a nice little mix of everything. Let's get straight into it.
Chooses an enthusiast car that best represents the true spirit of motoring, including design.
It is similar to the Pebble Beach Concours, only in part, since this collection of cars is a mix of old and new, with the focus being on the exotic and the expensive. So I was amazed to find vintage Alfa Romeos and some gorgeous classic Porsches sharing the stage with new cars like the Bentley Continental GTC or the rather smart new Cadillac ATS. The Pagani Huayra is just loaded with carbon fiber, and if you think the car looks absolutely outlandish on the outside, just look at the styling. Wait till you see what it looks like on the inside. Pagani is an Italian manufacturer that specializes in niche sports cars and yes, also makes carbon fiber. The Huayra is its most ambitious car yet, and it's priced at $1,150,000. Now here's a car I would absolutely love to drive. Not just because it's a sports car, not just because it looks absolutely outlandish, but because it's also got a 6-liter AMG engine in the back with 1,000 Newton meters of torque. What are you going to do with that much torque? It's just unbelievable. And of course the way it looks, the instruments, it's completely out of a Hollywood movie. That's how I feel right now, as if I'm in a sci-fi space age movie. Okay, so enough of the newbies, eh? Back to the classics, because after all, that's why I'm here, right? For car enthusiasts, coming to an event like this becomes special also because you get to see classics like these. A brand like Porsche, for example, this one, the 1955 356 Continental. The idea is, you know, you get to see the evolution of that brand as well, right next to a 73 Carrera. The point I'm trying to make is that these are cars that you sometimes, you know, just read about them. You've just seen them on the internet or in coffee table books, but you get to see them standing next to each other like this. And from a design point of view, from an engineering point of view, you get to really understand that evolution so much better. And then, of course, we have to come to the brand which always captivates and gets a lot of attention, the prancing horse Ferrari. So you know how when you give a computer too many commands, it just hangs? Well, that's how my brain feels right now. It's just insane, the number of special classic cars that are here, all in one spot. Now, this particular end of it is the Ferrari exhibit. What you're seeing here is all sorts of classic Ferraris. There's Dinos, Daytonas, GTOs, all of them in mint condition, cars that have been driven here. And, you know, I'm not looking at them in a museum. They're all here under the beautiful blue sky. Like this 1963 GTO, for example, looking absolutely stunning in bright red. The Quail gathering attracts all kinds. This includes celebrities and notable auto personalities too. This year saw Sir Sterling Moss being interviewed on stage. The legendary British racer is a motorsporting icon who has won several endurance and Formula One races. He's been associated with brands like Lotus, Maserati and Mercedes-Benz. I got very lucky and managed to speak to Sir Sterling too. When you look around and you see these people and the cars and just the kind of atmosphere and excitement,
Well,
what does that mean to you?
This is what the atmosphere that you get with historic cars. The people are not necessarily old, but the cars are. And of course now you look at these cars, they're probably 10 times better than they were when they were new. But it's lovely to come here and meet like people, you know. I mean, we all have the idea of this is a nice sport to be connected with. And so it's always great to come here.
What are some of the? It's an unfair question to ask because I've got all these different achievements of your career in my head.
Yeah.
But what are some of the big milestones that stand out for you?
Well, the races are quite different, but I suppose the Mille Miglia is probably my greatest overall type of thing, and the Monaco in 1961 is another one, also Nürburgring of that year, but remember I drove 108 different cars in 590 odd races, so it's quite a big selection.
And the most difficult car for you to drive in
the
terms of
most difficult
controlling
car,
it?
Yeah, the most difficult was certainly the BRM, which stood for British Racing Motor, which was a disaster. I mean, it was never was successful and should never have been built. But if you ask the worst, that is it.
And you know, I mean, the Monaco race, for example, things are so different today as far as racing is concerned. Just the kind of electronics you have on a car. Back then, it was all about how much you could get out of the car, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Purely, I mean, it was down to the driver. And the races in those days, remember, were 3-hour minimum. And Monaco was 3 3/4 hours, but it was the driver and the car, and I think if you have a really great driver like Fangio, he's probably worth 25 or 30% of the winningness of the car. Now, the very best driver in the world, however good he is, only contributes probably 5 or 6% because the cars are so good.
Do you still follow it as keenly though?
Oh yeah, not as keenly obviously as when you're driving, but I mean certainly I still follow Formula One. It is interesting rather than exciting.
Do you get a chance to see or experience any of the cars that you used to drive? Do you have any of them with you now?
No, I do have an RS61 Porsche, which I drove in 1961, of course. I'm not racing it at the moment because I retired when I was 82. I thought probably that's long enough, so I've now got them and I'm keeping them because they're worth more to me as they are in my care than selling them.
How often do you get to just you in a car? How often do you get to do that these days?
On a circuit, you mean, and enjoy the car?
Yeah, on a circuit.
Oh, only once or twice a year, maybe. Very, very rarely.
And out on the open road?
Oh, on the open road, I try different cars whenever I get the opportunity. You know, if a manufacturer brings out something, say, try this, I'd certainly do that.
Anything specific that you've driven, let's say, recently that really impressed you, that you like what they've done?
Not specifically I can think of like that, but the great thing you've got to realise is that cars today, even the worst car is still quite good by comparison to old ones, you know.
Which is not how it used to be.
Not at all. I mean, there were cars that were so bad that you wouldn't want to drive them. Now, if you're talking road cars, I really have a job to think of, oh God, that's an awful beast. There aren't many.
That's true. But, you know, what we've also seen is a resurgence of the British brands.
Yes.
They're all doing really well, you know, from a market point of view, but also from a product point of view. They're sort of really holding their own now. You've seen even McLaren coming out with the MP 412C. Is that encouraging for you to see that resurgence?
I think it's terrific. I mean, obviously the McLaren is a very special vehicle and it's only ever going to be sold in 1s and 2s, you know what I mean? But to see that technology going around and it being British technology, that's very good. I mean, we have developed, one thing you've got to remember is every car in the world now, I think I'm right in saying, has disc brakes. Yeah. Those disc brakes were developed by Jaguar and Dunlop, including and the guy, their engineers, and I helped with it. And that is, to me, something of which I'm very proud. Because it's very, very, very important.
How do you view today's Formula One driver? I mean, do you think these guys are? Of course, everybody wants to win, But
Yeah,
how do they
the-
approach it? Do you think they approach it the
Well,
same way you used to?
No, I don't. Nothing like the same. But the point is, it's just such a different. It isn't a sport anymore. It's a business, a very good business, beautifully run, and the drivers drive well and all that. But it isn't. It used to be a sport, and obviously you can't make a thing that was the real business into a sport again. It doesn't happen.
As I mentioned to you, I've come in from India, and it's a part of the world where many of our people are now waking up to motorsport. It's
Yeah.
not something that we've
Yeah.
always had, but it's exciting. Do you think it's nice to see that motorsport is getting popular in parts of the world
I
where it
think it's
wasn't?
wonderful. I mean, India, you've got what 300 million people or something. Or
Oh, more, a whole lot more.
Oh well, anyway,
About 1.2
anyway.
billion.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going over to join them for a thing of the Maharajas in February next year, I think. But no, I certainly look forward to going over there.
And we have our own Grand Prix now.
Yes,
so-
of course you do.
Yeah.
And your own team. You know, and Force Injured. I mean, they're doing very well. Very well.
One of the featured classes this year are the Shelby Cobras. Now, there's been lots of sort of allure around Cobras in general, isn't it? But getting a lot of attention at Pebble Beach this year. Now, what's interesting also is that these cars, you've seen that they're all in sort of working condition, but there's also classic car races that are held at the famous Laguna Seca track, which isn't very far from here as well. And I had the chance to be there, and guess what? We were actually there when there was a featured race for Shelby Cobra that was on too. So let me take you there now and show you what Laguna Seca and the classic car races are all about.
The Rolex Monterey Motorsports Reunion is an annual racing event held at the 3.6-kilometer long Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, California. The whole idea is to offer classic car owners, race enthusiasts and visitors an event for historic race cars to compete in. The races are held across various categories and have now been organized within the same week as the Concours d'Elegance at Pebble Beach. The races have been held for nearly 4 decades now. It's CNB's first time at the spectacular Laguna Seca track. This track plays host to the US Motorcycle GP and the American Le Mans Series as well.
It's a great atmosphere here at Laguna Seca. We're standing on a little hillside which gives us a great vantage point just coming out of the famous corkscrew. And what I can tell you is that, you know, unlike a lot of the other races, it's the great weather that adds to the almost carnival-like atmosphere that we're seeing here. People are out here in droves. There have been lots of cars backed up on the highway leading in. Everybody is just so into this entire space, and you can see that there's seniors, there's kids, there's all kinds of people here, celebrities too. We ran into Jay Leno a short while ago, asked him about his Tata Nano. So it's just the atmosphere that gets so electric, and then of course you have just the sheer number of categories of cars that are out on the track. Right now, it's the Shelby Cobras.
The atmosphere was indeed excellent. Lots of people, lots of noise too. And not just Cobras, classic cars of every shape, size and era that you can imagine. And the kicker, they're all in running or make that racing condition.
It's been staggering to see the kind of cars that have been lined up here ready to race. I mean, you've got cars as old as 1911, they're cars from the 20s, the 30s. And what's been really fascinating is not just the pristine condition I'm seeing them in, but also the fact that you're not just seeing the American cars. There's Studebakers and Fords, sure, but you're also seeing Alfa Romeos, BMWs, Fiats, Bugattis. It is absolutely fantastic. The atmosphere, the enthusiasm around these cars, and the cars themselves.
Cars as old as 1910 and even some rare gems from the likes of Ford, Ferrari, Jaguar, Bentley and Porsche. We also saw some American muscle cars on the track in the Trans Am categories. With paddock access, we managed to see and touch the cars, of course, but we also saw just how much passion these owners and collectors have for their cars. They spend hours getting things right, sometimes relying on each other for help. And some come to see some of the new metal, concepts and cult classics also on display here, including tributes like the one to Shelby Cobra this year. And for others, it's just the overall experience and perhaps a chance to take along some of it back with them, either as a memento or a memory.
This is what it's all about, folks. Just watching this 1911 Fiat being driven to this spot right next to the ocean. Just look at that. What a gorgeous view. And for me, that's what Pebble Beach was always supposed to be. And it's lived up to that expectation, perhaps even outdone my expectations. It's our first time here, CNB, being at Pebble Beach, and it was also kind of a nice, proud feeling to have a little bit of India here too this time. React to what you've seen on the program. I'd love to know what you think, and you know how to do that, of course. I will be back next week with something exciting as always. Perhaps not as exciting because it's difficult to follow up Pebble Beach with something bigger, but you got to tell me what you thought of it all. And of course, promise me that you will wear your seatbelts and wear your helmets. Bye-bye.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.